Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm here with my good friend Richard Hicks to talk to you about the Power on AOVPN reporting solution that is now generally available. It's good to have you with us. I appreciate it's pretty early your time.
Thanks for joining me, Leo, and thanks for making this awesome solution. And it's going to be really helpful. I think folks on the call today are really going to find some value in this solution. I think having this kind of visibility that this solution provides is going to be tremendously helpful in saving time and I think preventing outages. I think that at the end of the day, your folks on the call are going to see that it's going to be pretty compelling.
Absolutely. So just kind of starting off with the agenda, kind of want to kind of introduce the solution to those of you who haven't necessarily seen or heard of it before. Then talk through kind of show you the product itself and have a nice discussion about some of its features and functionality. Then kind of summarize what we see as the main benefits and use cases, and kind of finishing off with a Q&A. So speaking of the Q&A, please do submit your questions in the chat throughout the whole presentation. If there's something relevant to what we're talking about, we may come to it at the time. If not, we'll kind of come back to them at the end. And it doesn't necessarily need to be directly related to the AOVPN reporting solution. Feel free, if you've got any questions around kind of AOVPN in general or DPC, then we can certainly try and answer those at the end as well. So just kind of wanted to start with the what is and introduce the solution. So this is the main front page of the application itself. So ultimately it's a Power BI dashboard which allows the consolidated input or the consolidated reporting from across all of your routing and remote access servers.
And to add to that, Leo, for the audience, one of the challenges that we face with Always On VPN is that each VPN server, our RAS server that you deploy, is siloed, right? So we know that we can deploy 2 or 200, and they don't talk to each other. They don't know about each other. They share no state. They have their own reporting databases. And the real pain is that when you have more than 2 or 3, sometimes even just 2 is a pain. But when you have many servers, it can be challenging when you're trying to run user activity reports, or you're just trying to assess system health and system load and those types of things. So this solution was born out of that pain that the folks at PowerOn were trying to address for their customers that had large estates, right, large deployments of RAS, and were struggling with that, visibility of again, system utilization, system health, user activity, and those types of things. And so that's kind of where this started. That was the genesis of this project. And ultimately what this is a consolidated and centralized reporting solution that allows you to have visibility into system health status and resource consumption and utilization across as many RAS servers as you have in your own environment.
That's very well put, Richard. Do you want to join in the sales team?
I don't want to cut in on Matt's territory there. I'll let him deal with that.
Yeah. So the reason we had to kind of build this and build on top of the RAS solution is because of some fundamental decisions that Microsoft made when they were creating the reporting stuff, sometimes many years ago now. While Windows servers do capture their VPN reporting data and statistics, which we're utilizing here, they save them by, the only supported way to save those out is using the Windows internal database, which is a cut down version of SQL Server that's embedded into the Windows OS. But one of the key limitations of it is it doesn't support any kind of remote access, which means that inevitably to access the data out of that database, you have to be on the local machine. So to kind of get round that, the overall solution architecture that we've kind of come up with is that on each of the routing remote access servers, we actually have a Windows service that we install and run, and that captures both that reporting database information. We actually do an export of those databases on a regular basis, and then we capture, because we've got that agent on the device, it kind of seems silly not to capture a whole range of other useful information about those devices, so that we could then have that centralized health and configuration capability across the machine and across the estate in general. So that then each machine then needs to be able to talk out to a storage account, and this storage account sits in your environment, the customer's environment. We don't have any access or control to that. It as part of the provisioning process, you kind of set that up, and we then link in, or the agent then link in and access that data. And then you provision the Power BI report out of the Microsoft App Source gallery. And then part of the setup of that is you point it again at that storage account, and it's able to read the data out of there.
And I think it's important to set the expectation level here. Because we are extracting data from these databases, we are uploading it to the Azure storage account and then running reports on it. This is not a real-time or even a near real-time solution. So if you're looking for a user who's currently connected, for example, you're not going to see that. It's not instantaneous. If you're looking for what is the specific CPU utilization of a server right now or within the last even hour, that may not be there. I think it's important to share that with the audience, that this is not a real-time or near real-time, and maybe you could talk to some of the mechanics of how data is, you'd shared with me how data is uploaded and how Power BI refreshes, because it doesn't refresh like all the time, or I think it was hourly, daily, or 8 hours. I forget what it was, or maybe I can't remember if it was you or somebody else who told me that.
Yeah, so ultimately we are bound, because we are using Power BI as the front end technology, we are bound by some of its limitations. So the first one is potentially the Power BI licensing situation, is that ultimately, as well as purchasing the report from ourselves, you do also need to have your own Power BI licensing. Now, if you've got M365 or Office 365 E5, you do have Power BI Pro included for all of those users. But there's also approaches that you can take around purchasing Power BI Pro directly, or with premium per user, or you can actually effectively rent compute capacity, and as long as it's greater than F32 in size, you can make use of these reports. Then, sorry.
No, good.
Going into the data latency side of things, Power BI by default, when you provision a report, provisions or does an update once a day, but you can then set up additional automatic refreshes up to 8 times a day for Pro and premium per user license things. Where you've got premium capacity, which you're paying for, you can have it go up to 48 times a day, but that tends to be the rarity rather than the majority of end users.
So just to clarify there, if a customer does need something more than the 8 times a day, they can pay for premium capacity and get greater granularity, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay,
although and then you can also do manual refreshes as well. So if there is like a particular time where you definitely need the latest data, you can do a manual refresh, but I believe that it's only the application owner in your organization that can actually trigger a manual refresh.
I see. Okay, good to know.
Also, because of these limitations, the actual agent on the devices defaults to only uploading data once an hour, although that is a configurable setting, and you can drop that down to just a single minute if you really want to, although I wouldn't recommend going anywhere near that low.
Of course.
And then the other major consideration is that you need to consider that storage count and the ability to host that data yourselves. That's not something that Power currently offers as a service. So just looking through a couple of the questions here. I've got one from Rolf as to whether it's usable in an on-premises environment.
So are we talking about the VPN infrastructure?
That's my understanding.
So if that's the case, indeed, yes, that's why it was designed, because there basically isn't anything of value that's configured with that. So yeah, so if you have on-premises RAS servers, by the way, those RAS servers could be deployed in Azure or GCP or AWS. It really doesn't matter. This works. The agent runs on Windows Server with RAS installed with the inbox accounting configured. I think that's critical. Inbox accounting is an optional setting in RAS that you have to enable. And once that's enabled, all the logging goes to a local SQL database, as Leo had mentioned. But at that point, yeah, we don't care where the server is. If it's on premises, it's in Azure. What it doesn't do is it doesn't work with Azure Virtual Gateway or Azure Virtual WAN. This is designed for Windows Server routing and remote access.
Yeah, and again, if you are using another vendor for the back end of your AOVPN, say a Cisco ISE or any of that stuff, again, this solution won't work with those, simply because the way the data stored, the data structures, effectively means rewriting the entire product from scratch for each one of those data sources. So at the moment, we're only concentrating on Windows Server.
Certainly, and by the way, just to add to that, if you're using a different backend infrastructure, Cisco, Palo Alto, what have you, they have their own reporting solutions. So
then you probably much better than the built-in.
Probably wouldn't. Certainly better than the native RAS stuff, but yes, absolutely. So they would have their own solution there.
Yeah. So the key thing with the on-premises infrastructure is that those RAS servers just need that outbound to the internet to be able to talk out to the storage account. Although if you are using private endpoints and an express route and things like that, you can absolutely use all of that stuff as well.
Awesome.
So do we have to upload to Azure, or can we send to an on-premises LAN database? Unfortunately, at this time, the only supported data storage solution is an Azure storage account. The reason for that is that the Power BI dashboard, which sits out effectively in the Microsoft Cloud, also needs to be able to communicate with that storage account to read the data out of it. And the simplest architecture to support that was having that cloud native storage account. So we're not able to support a fully on-premises solution at this time, and in the fact that the data storage does need to sit in Azure.
Good point. Yeah.
So just to kind of let people know about the purchasing model for this, at the moment, it is a subscription only service. So you purchase a yearly subscription based on the number of RAS machines that you have. So we don't care about concurrent users or the MPS servers or any of that stuff. It's purely the number of RAS servers that you are wanting to monitor through the solution. And at the moment, we're also including a small amount of consultancy just to assist with that initial setup and deployment to make sure that everyone is, or like everything is set up and good to go.
Excellent.
So what people are most, I assume, most looking forward to is a demo.
Me too, Leo. I want to show it.
Yeah.
I want them to see it. Seeing is believing. Let's see it. Let's have a look at it.
Absolutely. So do you want to bring up your environment, Richard, as you've probably
I can.
got a bit more data in it than my test lab?
I certainly can. Let's see here. Does it let me share? I can find the right window. Screen number 2. Outstanding. Okay. So yeah, so this is it. This is the reporting platform. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger. Actually, I don't want to lose that detail. There we go. Yeah, this is the reporting platform. So what we have done to this point is I obviously have an estate of VPN servers, RAS servers, deployed on premises. Again, these are all on premises, but they could be on premises. They could be in Azure, or GCP, or AWS, or what have you. It doesn't really matter. You have an RAS server. We've installed the agent. The agent's a lightweight agent that gets installed on the device, and then from there, the device, the VPN server, the agent running on the VPN server has some settings that need to be configured. That's done with group policy. So if you have server GUI, you can just open up the local group policy editor, and then you could just enter some information, and there's some settings there. You have to put in your license. You have to put in the blob URL, the storage table, the table URL. There's a few things you have to add, and then once that's done, then you get the agent installed on all your servers. You push out those group policy settings, and by the way, on Server Core, all works fantastic on Server Core. You can install the agent in quiet mode, so you don't have to. There's no prompts or anything like that. Then what I do is typically just import a registry file that has all my settings in it and restart the service, and you're good to go. They do need to have outbound access to the internet, specifically to Azure. I'm sure there are ways to ACL that if you have those types of constraints. I don't know what those are, but I'm sure you can find that. But at the end of the day, it does need to talk to Azure. And once it does that, it will basically take the database, start exporting that data and pushing it to your storage. And again, your storage, not power on storage. And also it extracts a bunch of other information in terms of configuration, health, and those types of things, resource utilization. And you can see that here. So I have 5 servers, and I'm on the summary tab right now, and this is the landing page. So when you install the application in Power BI and you open this up and you add your data here, you will see this landing page, which gives you I call this the 10,000-foot view, right? I have all of my VPN servers, and I have some information about my subscription status, some high-level information about client usage and concurrent connections per server, and again, some high-level information about, resource utilization. I have 6 servers. I think my concurrent connections are about 11, by the way. I think I fired up every test machine I had in here to make it look like I had something on here, which is about 7 or 8 machines, I think, is what I could find. But anyway, bottom line is this is a well underutilized environment. But I did do some things to make the demonstration go a little smoother. That being said, I do have at any point in any of these the ability to drill down into individual VPN servers. So if I'm interested in VPN 3, I just check the box, and now the overview changes to only information about this particular server. And this goes through all of the individual pages. So once I do that, I can drill down into the server overview, and this is where I think it starts to get compelling. Is I see at a high level or a little bit more granular level, I should say, some information about the health status of my platform. So you can see all of my VPN servers here. The overall status is fine. All of the connectivity and addressing status, all of this is gleaned from the information that's available on the RAS server. This is helpful because it shows me my spare connections and the percentage of spare connections that are available. This is tremendously helpful for environments for which you're heavily utilized. Capacity planning has always been a challenge for Windows Server RAS. Microsoft has no published guidance for this, so we just kind of have to wing it. Folks like myself and Leo have enough experience to know generally what kind of resources we need for roughly how many users we're expecting to get. But at the end of the day, there isn't a prescribed X amount of CPU, X amount of memory gets you X amount of users. There isn't anything like that.
It's the classic answer of it's a resource-based VPN tunnel. So the more you use it, the more resources it uses. So
100%.
Classic consultant answer of it depends.
Absolutely.
Try
Absolutely.
it
depends. Right. And I always ask customers, well, how many users will it support? We'll define user, right?
Yeah.
Is that user just accessing a SharePoint site, maybe a file once in a while, or are they pulling down, streaming video over the connection, or are they making SIP voice calls over the connection? It just depends, right? And so there's just too much. So capacity planning has always been challenging. Oftentimes we'll deploy, a bunch of servers, 2, 4, 8, whatever, and we find that we are well over provisioned, and we can say, hey, we could probably deprovision a couple of these. On the flip side, I have deployed environments where we've deployed 6 servers, and all of a sudden, once we get to, near production rollout, right, we find that all of a sudden, hey, we got a lot of capacity here. These things are pretty full. Maybe we underestimated. So we can add resources, we can add servers and do things like that. So this is going to be really helpful in those environments for which we need to better understand how utilized the entire solution is. This one I think is is awesome. And this, of course, here is our SSL certificate health status. Certificate expiration is the #1, hands down, cause for outages for RAS. Leo, it's probably the same for you. I probably get
Absolutely.
1 to 2 calls per week, emails or calls, where somebody says, hey, none of my clients are connecting. I don't know why. And we jump on and it's an expired certificate. And so expired certificates are the bane of always on VPN administrators everywhere. And no one seems to have a decent solution in place to monitor certificate lifetime validity and expiration dates. And so this is beautiful because it tells you, 1, it's healthy. 2, it will tell you when they are expiring or we're getting close to expiration. We'll take a look at that here shortly.
And that's also a configurable option in the report. By default, it's 30 days, but say
Correct.
You've got a longer like change management process, things like that, you could easily set it to 45 days, 60 days, etc.
Excellent point. Yes. So when you are setting up the solution, you define what those parameters are. So you define that, hey, I want to know in 30 days, or I want to know in 45 or 60, and then you define what a critical alert is, whether that's 7 days, 14, a week, or month, or what have you. So you can absolutely define those. So once again, we have our available connections. This is, again, really helpful for capacity planning. The number of active connections that were available, and again, this is a point in time, not a real-time solution. So when this database was last updated and the report was last refreshed, that's what that looked like. And then we have some information here about the amount of data that is being transferred here. So next, if I go down to this kind of server configuration section here, I want to bring your attention to a couple of things here. One of the things that can be, or that I find is quite problematic, and this comes up quite a bit in the work that I do, is I will get calls that say, hey, I'm having some trouble. We've deployed always on VPN, and we're having some trouble. Some users or some clients are having problems. And so one of the things that I often do is we'll go through and we'll do an environment configuration review and assessment. And one of the most common causes of challenges and issues there is misconfigured VPN servers. And so in my environment, what you will see here is that I have these 5 VPN servers, okay? All of them are configured. Where's my cursor? There it is. All of them are configured with 4 CPUs and 8 gig of RAM. That's my standard. But you'll notice one thing that stands out here, and it's this last one that is configured with 2 CPU and 4 gig of RAM. So in this scenario, I have deployed all my servers, but whoever provisioned VM number 5 used a different template, fat fingered some settings, who knows what, and it's only set up with 2 CPU and 4 gig of RAM, and it's easy to overlook those things, especially in busy environments. And so this obviously tells me, hey, I have a misconfigured server. I can go address that and bring that back into compliance. We have information about the reporting disk. So the reporting disk is, as we mentioned before, a SQL database. By default, it is installed on the C drive. Not the greatest idea, but not terrible either. But if you are provisioning your C drives thin, so in other words, sometimes organizations like here, I use I think an 80 gig C drive. Some use larger 120 gig. I do have customers that try to thin provision and will try to use 20 and 30 gig C drives. And in that case, this database can fill up and you can run out of disk space very quickly. So this is how much disk, this particular setting is how much disk space is available on that volume where the reporting disk is installed, and of course where the disk is installed. And this is critical here. This is the free space on the disk where the database is installed. So as this starts to drop, you can monitor this and take action. We might want to use the local tools on the specific server to remove some old data from the database. We might want to relocate the database. I have tools available to do that. I have tools that allow you to move the database to a different volume. So if you have very busy servers that are the databases are filling up rapidly, and you still want to have long retention time, like 6 months or a year, you may need to move that off to a separate volume. And also, if you're looking for optimal performance, you might want to do that as well. So once again, we have information on the database size, all excuse me, all critical, because again, we can have problems with that. Excuse me, the last thing I want to bring your attention to here is the number of ports. So this port configuration here, when we look at this, this is critical because we need to have enough ports available to support the number of concurrent connections that we have. If I'm expecting 500 or 600 concurrent connections, I need to have at least that many ports and IP addresses available. And so we list those number of ports as they're configured. So here you see the number of AOVPN ports are set to 500, but you'll notice here, once again, I have a misconfigured server. This is really, really common as well. Again, I've had customers call me and say, hey, we're getting these problems where some users can't connect, they get kicked out, or they get weird errors. And what you'll find here is that this specific server is misconfigured. It's supposed to have 500 SSTP ports. It's only configured for 128. And this is a really common scenario, because when you're making these changes in the UI, if you change both of them, so first of all, if you go more than 128 ports, you must restart the server completely to affect that change. You can't just restart the services. I have seen customers where they'll change both of them from the default of 128 to like 500 on both, and then not restart the server right away and make some other changes. And what can happen is one of those settings will stick and the other one won't. So this is a really, really common scenario. So once again, having the visibility at a high level of all your servers in one place does allow you to identify misconfigurations much more easily. And again, this stuff is fantastic. The fact that we have our certificate expiration dates, there should be no more expired certificates, because you will, one, see when they're going to expire, two, you'll get some nasty yellow and red marks, hopefully, to call your attention to those expired certificates. So that's fantastic. And then our uptime, this is really helpful for perhaps diagnosing troubles. I would look at this and go, that's interesting. All my servers have been up for 6 days except for that last one. Why was that? Did it reboot? Did somebody perform maintenance on it? It might be interesting to me to find out why that is. So
the other thing on the uptime side of things, if it's been up for more than 30 days, we know that it's not got latest patches.
right?
That's the first red flag
Absolutely.
for me, is if a
If
system's been online for too
You're
long.
absolutely right. If I see one of these that's been up for 4 months, I'm going to talk to it, right? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It seems like every single month that it's going to need something. So you're right. They'll reboot every 30 days at least. So awesome. So this alone is fantastic. So we have our available connections, and this is across the enterprise and so forth. Our data transfer as well. I can drill down into the VPN server configuration a little deeper here and look at some additional information as well. IP address pool configuration. This is huge because if I don't have enough IP addresses, it doesn't matter how many ports I have. If I have 1,000 ports, but I've only provisioned a /24 and I only have 200 and something 250 something addresses, then I'm going to run out of IP addresses long before I run out of ports. Also, if I'm expecting 500 or 600 users, I'm not going to have enough. So that's really helpful to see how these addresses here are assigned. By the way, this solution is still a work in progress, and you'll see that VPN1 has lots of different subnets, and I can scroll down to VPN2 and it says more. So hopefully that gets fixed soon. But at the end of the day, you can see that I have the number of IP addresses that are available in the pool. This tells me how many ports I have as well. And this is, again, a bit more information about our utilization and so forth. But the fact that you can look at the number of IP addresses and very easily see, oh, well, maybe I fat fingered here and I have too many or not enough addresses, I would see that information here. We have our authentication server. So if you're using NPS, which everybody is, or even if you're using ICE or something else, this is basically saying, hey, this is the configuration. You'll see that I'm not using any authentication or accounting servers. I didn't set that up in my environment. But if you're using RAS or NPS, excuse me, or Radius for accounting, you can do that there as well. This is super critical because this whole section tells me how our certificate information is, right? So this is our SSTP certificate specifically. Everybody's healthy, tells me who the issuer is and what the subject name is. Again, I might be able to find a misconfigured certificate here. If I have one that's configured incorrectly, it would show up here. So that's really helpful. And then high-level information down here for our server information. This could be helpful to know that, hey, maybe I've got an outdated server here that I didn't realize when we did an upgrade, maybe we missed one. That might be helpful as well. So all good stuff there. Moving on to the server performance. Now, the server performance information here, by the way, there's a little slider here. I can slide around and get more details. But server performance is fantastic because this is kind of a snapshot of how the server has been performing historically. Once again, tremendously helpful for capacity planning. I can view this over time and see, hey, if I'm consistently and persistently seeing CPU utilization go up and up and up, I know, hey, maybe it's time to scale out, add some additional resources, or maybe add VPN servers. So processor, CPU utilization, memory utilization, disk free space over time. So you can see is that starting to climb? Maybe I need to take action there. All good stuff here. And again, I can't stress enough that you have the ability to drill down at any time. So here, I'm going to be able to go and look, well, I want to know specifically about VPN server 2 over this particular time range. I can just move the sliders and zoom in on that information and take a closer look at it. And of course, I'll reset that there. Let's go to our connection history. So the connection history, again, this is useful for capacity planning because it does give me a nice graph over time that tells me how busy these servers are. And so you can see is maybe as you're onboarding more and more users, you'll see this start to climb. Again, this is really helpful for informing the administrators when they need to take action to add resources or scale out. You can actually drill down to servers or individual hosts or users. So I can actually look at specific connections from a user. And I can also drill down and look at this by specific server as well. So I can see how an individual server is doing. I want to go to client distribution. So client distribution, this is a fantastic page here as well, because if you have more than one server, you're using something for load balancing. At a minimum, probably DNS round robin, sometimes using Azure Traffic Manager or some other GSLB, probably using a load balancer like F5, NetScaler, Camp, any variety of those. But at the end of the day, we want to know that our connections are being evenly or somewhat evenly distributed in that environment. If that's your model, you may be doing active passive, so it may look a little different. But here I'm trying to distribute all of my clients across a number of servers, and you can see that here. And again, over time, so I can change the slider there. I can look at the usage, the number of tunnel types. You see that I have many more IKV2 than SSTP, and then our client connections by endpoint. And these are the actual resources that we're accessing over the tunnel. This is super high level. If we get into the connection detail, drilling into the detail, and I think this one is fantastic. And if anybody on the call who's ever had to run a report and say, InfoSec calls and says, hey, listen, we've had an event and we need to know where Joe user went around this particular date time. What did they access and where did they access it from? Well, if you have more than one server, you're having to run reports on each server, right? So and again, for my customers that have dozens or dozens and dozens of servers, I have some large customers that have many servers. That gets really tedious. I've written some PowerShell scripts to help that, but at the end of the day, it's really challenging. Here, now that we're uploading all of this information across all of our VPN servers to a central location, I can just simply find the username in my list here. So let's find out where what Rick Deckard was doing here. So I've selected this user. And at this point here, I've got this date range that's pretty broad. I want to drill down a little bit and let's see where they were. Let's see here. Let's go back to last year and see what we can find. So during this time, for example, I want to find out where this specific user went. And I'm looking across all servers at this point, and I can see they made connections to these two VPN servers. And so these are all of the connections, but I can then get really granular here and start to drill down and see, well, on this day, what did they access on this VPN 3 on this specific date? And there you have it. There's all of their resources. I didn't have to run a report on each individual server. I just simply drilled down for the username and then started drilling down further and further to find the information that we needed. So this is just tremendously helpful.
The other thing that this does is that we also attempt to resolve the IP addresses. So the data captured in the underlying database only stores the IP addresses that it's connecting to. But when we're doing the extraction, we actually attempt to do a reverse lookup on that IP address to try and give you some greater information as to what you're actually trying to connect to without having to do your own kind of lookups. That's obviously not perfect because it is relying on reverse DNS functioning on those servers, but where it does, it can be a useful, helpful tool.
Fantastic. Yeah, excellent. And by the way, congratulations to the team at PowerOn. Leo, thank you. Full IPv6 support. I'm running IPv6 in my lab, and the IPv6 addresses show up in here. It is not a second-class citizen like it is in so many other products. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate
one
it
IPv6 user that we have.
I think so. I have a few customers that are using it, so hopefully we get some more on board. But at the end of the day, I love IPv6. It solves a lot of problems, and so I use it as much as possible. So anyway, so yes, IPv6 is fully supported in this solution. You'll be glad to know. Last tab I want to get to, and then I want to wrap things up. This is our data flow tab. So this just gives us an idea of how data is flowing through the server, the amount of data that we're pulling and pushing through this server, and an overview kind of way. Let me go back and actually clear that username. So this would be all users across all VPN servers. And once again, this date time, I can move that out and slide that around. And so I can get very granular, look at this per server or even individual user or device. And so I have the ability to see, a data flow. This can be really helpful, by the way. And I have some some personal experience with this many years ago when I was working for a company as an information security engineer. It's sometimes really easy to spot anomalous data exfiltration, because you'll look and you'll find that, hey, most users download this much, but one user downloads exponentially more than everybody else. Maybe we should take a look at that user and see what they're doing. And so that these can be helpful for identifying those outliers that might be just one, busy users, or maybe we need to address how they're working. Maybe they don't need to pull all these files down over the VPN. Maybe there's a better way to put those on a cloud storage service or something like that. Or two, perhaps it is data exfiltration. And like I said, I have some experience with that in a previous job where we were able to identify somebody stealing data from the company and selling it to our competitors, where we identified that as a download over a VPN. So it basically just, once we ran the reports, you could see it very plainly, and it was plainly evident that this user was much more active than any other user in the enterprise. So it allowed us to drill down a little more deeply and identify what that source was, and it was problematic, and we were able to prosecute and successfully remediate that. So anyway, that is my overview of the Power On Platforms AOVPN reporting. Thank you so much, Leo, for letting me share this, because I'm super excited about it, and I hope others will be. By the way, and I'm sure the reason this product exists is because customers demanded it.
Absolutely.
I can't tell you, from the days that I started working, even with direct access, but now when we moved to always on VPN, and by the way, this was a step back for our RAS, and always on VPN was a step back from direct access, because with direct access, you had the native management tools, right? The remote access management console, and it had the advantage that it could see all of your direct access servers, right? So that management console was able to go out to each server and collect that information, and you could at least show it in one console, even if you had 20 direct access servers, either load balanced cluster or multi-site or any combination of the two. But once we started moving to RAS and always on VPN, then they're all siloed. So we kind of lost even what little functionality we had. So having something like this is going to be, I think, tremendously beneficial.
Absolutely.
I'll turn it back over to you, Leo.
Yeah, I was just completely failing at using Teams. There we go. So, just to really kind of summarize the key benefits from all of that. I mean, Rich did a wonderful job at kind of going through that as we all went through. But yeah, ultimately, the general approach is that we're trying to take with this is to provide as much information, relevant information, in as little effort and time as possible by kind of creating it all into a single view, allowing for that really nice set of analysis between the health and the performance side of things. So sure, you can jump onto the boxes and have a look at what the real-time CPU and memory is, and if you want to be fancy, you can even go look at the performance monitor and stuff like that. But it's normally more effort than most organizations will go to actually start to do that analysis of what are our highest peaks and what does the CPU and memory actually do at those specific times. And that stuff can be useful both from a technical perspective, but also to going back to the business in terms of going, hey, this is like a good solution for the business. We are currently running an average of, say, 2,000 concurrent users on this solution. And it's about promoting. Sometimes it can be as simple as promoting the IT team back into the rest of the business and showing not just when things go wrong that they get fixed, but also that things are operating at scale for the businesses, and that no news is good news in some cases.
Right, and I think it demonstrates, you're absolutely 100% correct there. It demonstrates that not only have you implemented the solution, but that you're looking after it, and that you're mindful that remote access is a critical service today, right? We learned that post-COVID, and the lessons learned from COVID, certainly you guys did as probably as well as I did, is that a lot of customers were not prepared for that, and so when they sent everybody home and everybody had to work from home, so many of my customers, their infrastructure just fell apart, right? Just came crashing down because they just weren't able to handle that capacity. Now you have visibility and insight into the health and utilization of your environment in a single console. And you demonstrate the value of the solution to management and the key stakeholders and let them know, look at, not only did we implement this, but we're actually monitoring it. We're actively looking after it. We can proactively add capacity, but also remove. I mean, I have worked with customers who, I've seen they've got 8 servers and we look at them, it's like, we have like 100 connections per server, right? It's like, we don't need all these. We can clear some resources here and give you something back. We're always almost always operating in shared VM environments. So anytime we can reduce resources, that's a win too. So I think it's really helpful. But at the end of the day, just having the ability to see our certificates is going to be probably the biggest win right there. So no question about that.
Yeah. So on to the questions, and we've got quite a few today.
Great.
Let's have a look through. We've got so is there any option to view the geolocation based on IP? So at this point there isn't. We did look at this in great detail during the early development phases. Unfortunately, for a commercial offering, which this is, doing the geolocation lookups at scale requires effectively commercial offerings on that lookup side of things, and that's something that we weren't able to really offer at this point, although it's something we would absolutely love to do.
That is a fantastic suggestion, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to add that to my feature request list because I think that's something I didn't even think about. Great question, whoever submitted that. It would be fantastic to have a map, right? Just another pane that just says map and just shows you where in the world your connections are coming from.
And Power BI does offer that stuff.
Assuming you are capturing the client's original source IP address. So if you are doing source natting to your VPN service, which you should not be, but if you are, they're all going to be private IP addresses, and so that's going to be useless data. But at the end of the day, that is a fantastic solution. Maybe that's a premium offering in the future. What do you think, Lou?
Yeah, it's certainly something that I would like to revisit.
That'd be great.
It just then comes down to the how do we make that work from a commercial perspective. But yes, it's certainly
I could see the value in that. I'm looking at a map and I say, wow, I don't have anybody in China, but I've got 2 VPN connections from China. What was the story there? I might want to look into that a little bit more closely. That's a great suggestion.
Yeah. So we've got a number of questions around the ability to send proactive alerts. So at this time, the Dash or Power BI doesn't really support any of that side of things. So the solution doesn't at this time. It's a great feature request. We can certainly see the value of it, but it does effectively require an additional service to be created to do the proactive side of things. So never say never, but not currently.
No, I definitely can see the value in that as well. And for the folks on the call, it is important to remember that this is like V1, right? So all great suggestions and feedback, and I say keep them coming. But that's a great piece of feedback there, and maybe we can do something with that later.
100%, because ultimately we are a feedback-led organization.
Right.
The more features that we can hit from customers and potential customers ultimately leads to a better product. So then there's a couple of questions around what happens if the certificate has been revoked. So the IKE v2 certificate, I can definitely tell you, when we're looking through to see whether the certificate is the correct or likely to be the one being used on the server, we do check to see whether it is valid, and that calls the underlying subsystem when it's not some kind of proprietary set of checks that we're doing it. We're relying on the .NET consideration of whether it's valid or not. On the SSL or the SSTP certificate, I believe that what we're doing is we're actually reading the certificate configuration out of the RAS configuration itself, and therefore it's whatever the client is using, although I don't think we directly have a flag as to whether it's revoked or not at this point.
Interesting.
So that is a very good point, and I'll add that to our consideration. It might already be functional. If not, it'll get added to the feature request list.
I would say let's do some testing on that. It'd be interesting to know. I can do that pretty easily. The good news is that revoking a public TLS certificate is probably not a common use case or scenario, so hopefully we don't run into that too often. But you're right, we should plan for that eventuality because it could happen.
Yeah. So someone was asking around the choosing the exact time and date for the data lookups, and hopefully we've kind of demonstrated that is absolutely possible.
Yep, absolutely.
So someone's asking about the data, whether that's outbound only, and yes, from the server to the storage account, that is a one-way operation, and it's effectively a write once, read many database that we've got set up. So the Power BI dashboard never modifies the data in the storage account, and the servers only update their data in the storage account as well. They never go back and modify anyone else's data or anything like that. And so in terms of how much data does the server use, that is actually entirely dependent on the logging configuration on the servers. So the vast majority of the data actually comes from that reporting database that is configured on each of the servers. The default for that is set up for 12 months of retention, although that is entirely configurable by yourselves, and that will directly relate to the amount of data or and then the usage of the platform or of the VPN solution. Then obviously impacts the amount of logging that happens into that database, which then leads to the upload. So that is configurable if you are seeing particularly high usage charges.
I see one question here that I'd like to address specifically. I don't know if we addressed it. Well, we talked about it briefly, but I just want to expound upon it more. Somebody asked, or somebody suggested or stated, we source NAT from the load balancer to the AOVPN servers. Is that bad? The answer is yes. And the reason it's bad is there's a couple of different reasons it is. So first of all, within the context of our conversation today, it's bad because the reporting database will log your client connections as being the source of that specific connection. And the source, if you're translating the source, would not be the client's original public IP address. It would be your load balancer's private IP address. So it would be the same. It would be the same private IP address for all of those connections. So one, it renders your those reports somewhat useless because you're losing that rather valuable piece of information. But there are other ramifications. Keep in mind that when the VPN server sees this client connection come in, this is specifically around IKE v2, which uses IPsec. Windows has some limitations on the number of IPsec security associations it will negotiate at one time from one client. And if your client, quote client, I put that in air quotes, is always the load balancer and not the client's original public source IP address, then you can run afoul of those limitations, and they're hard coded. They're not adjustable. There's one or two of the settings that are, but there's a very critical one that is not, and it's limited, and it's actually limited set quite low. And so you can run into some real problems in addition to just not being able to see those IP addresses, but you can have problems with the IKE v2 tunnel. So if you're using device tunnel, or if you're using IKE v2 for the user tunnel, you could potentially have problems there. Now, the challenge, of course, is with a load balancer, if you are doing, if you're going to disable source NAT, so now you're just NATing the destination, but passing the client's original source IP address, it can pose routing problems. So because that traffic needs to go back through the load balancer. If it does not, for example, if that traffic comes in through the load balancer and tries to go back and egress to the internet through your firewall is going to complain because obviously it didn't see that connection establishment. So it will fail. So you have to send that traffic back through the load balancer, which in some environments can be challenging. One, some environments, some network engineers don't like to do that. Two, if the load balancer is not on the same subnet as the VPN server, that poses a real problem because obviously your default gateway has to be on the same subnet. So there are some potential limitations there. I have information on my website about how to set those up for all of the major load balancers, but if you want to reach out to me directly, I'd be happy to share more with you on how you can address that. So anyway, just wanted to speak to that one specifically, Leo.
Yep, thank you. It's always good to get the word out on that one. I was having the exact same conversation with a customer earlier this week.
Mm-hmm.
Just to follow up on Mark's comment around the summary and the overview pages, and the fact that these are the latest information at this time. We do actually capture all of the historical data. We just don't expose it right now, so that's a very good feature request. We'll certainly take that one into account in the future as well. And then do you want to just end? I appreciate we've got only a couple of minutes left, but we had actually the first question that came through was, where's Microsoft going with AOVPN? Are they looking to develop it further?
So good question. The answer is I don't know for certain. However, I do know that Always On VPN is going to be around for a period of time. I mean, it's still a fantastic solution. It works well today. I don't know if they're investing in it, quote, investing in it proper, but they certainly seem to be, right? In other words, they're making changes to the VPN client CSP, adding features and capabilities, mostly on the client side. The VPN server side is pretty mature. I don't think you're going to see any new features and functionalities there, but nor do I think we need them, honestly. So I think it's a viable solution for the for the near future. I think in a period of time, we're probably going to look at moving towards zero trust solutions as zero trust solutions become more predominant and more mature. Microsoft has an offering there, and you'll probably see customers start to migrate that over the next few years. But for now, I think Always On VPN will be around with us for quite some time. And honestly, Microsoft's new ZTNA solution, Enter Private Access, has some serious limitations if you're doing anything around hybrid joint or domain joint. So it may not be useful in those scenarios. And in those cases, Always On VPN will definitely be the solution of choice for many years to come.
Yeah. So I suppose before I say anything, I will stress that this is very much my own personal opinion without any kind of internal or insider knowledge, really.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say that AOVPN, in my view, AOVPN at Microsoft isn't, it's certainly not in the cloud track, and therefore isn't getting all the AI dollars, put it that way. So they are keeping it around. It is still being maintained by the fact that as Richard said, they've added actual elements into the CSP in the new in 22H2 and in the upcoming version that's in public preview, insider preview, that's the word.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that that's very much more on the maintain and deal with the largest screaming issues, rather than, and they're certainly not going to do any kind of fundamental rewrites.
Right.
And the core limitations are likely to maintain the be maintained as the core limitations. And I suspect that over the next few years, the messaging out of Microsoft, which bearing in mind is always much earlier than most customers will move, the messaging out of Microsoft will be drop it like it's hot, go to global secure access.
Right. Yeah.
The reality is that there will be a considerable length of crossover time.
Absolutely.
Now, I like the look of global secure access in terms of its vision, and the whole tying the network in with the identities and this, that, the other. The three fundamental issues that I have with it at the moment is, one, is it's going to be an additional cost, and we don't know what that's going to be. That's a deal breaker to a lot of organizations straight off.
Right.
The fact that it currently doesn't support UDP, and the fact that you currently can't do port ranges, which means that any kind of domain traffic is an absolute no-go at this point. Now, my understanding is that those two ones are going to be fixed.
Yeah,
but
and
it's
they actually are. Those are in private preview right now. So those are coming. It's getting better. But you're right. It's sorely limiting today. And you're right. I think the biggest limitation around that is probably going to be price model. We don't know what that's going to be. And if the pricing isn't right, then you're going to look at that and say, well, why am I paying a premium price for a basic solution? I might invest in a premium solution. So a lot remains to be seen there. You're right. I like the idea. At the end of the day, it's not going to be a great solution for hybrid scenarios. So if you're still planning to be hybrid, probably going to be some challenges around that. You may still need AOVPN to support that. So always on VPN is going to be around for a number of years, no question about it.
A long time.
Yep.
Because even then, you've got the long tail of people still. I mean, there's still probably people out there with direct access.
I have a lot of customers that still have direct access. Yeah, absolutely.
Microsoft to be saying get off that thing for about 6-8 years now.
Right, at least, yeah. Awesome. Well, all right, we want to wrap things up.
Yeah. So thank you all very much for joining us. If you would like to get more information, then do just reply to the thank you for coming email that is coming out very soon. And thank you very much for joining.
Awesome. Thanks, Leo, for having me. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Just drop us a note, and cheers. Talk soon.
See you later then. Thank you.